Like many stories, that of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya also starts in Mumbai, the place to be for cityscapes, skylines, and dreams. But let's turn back the clock a little to Mumbai in the 1900s. In 1904, some of the city's residents gathered at the town hall and resolved to erect a museum using public support. In 1905, the Prince of Wales visited Mumbai and laid the foundation stone of this museum, which was to be called the Prince of Wales Museum of Western India. The museum was built in the unique Indo-Saracenic style of architecture. Construction completed in 1914, and the building was used as a military hospital during the First World War. In 1922, the museum finally opened its doors to the public. And thousands of objects, and about a century later, here we are, the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya. Unveil human history and art across millennia through its over 70,000 art collections from around the world. Participate in the stories surrounding the wonders of human creativity with this encyclopedic museum. This is the space where boundaries of time and space dilute, and what remains is a most immersive creative experience. Step in and slow down. Each object has a story to tell. Stories of our ancestors, stories of development, and stories of you, me, and us. Welcome to your museum.
The Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya is known for its significant collection of Indian miniature paintings. The collection represents almost all the schools of Indian miniature paintings to present a comprehensive story of the development of this beautiful art form. These paintings also help us to know the material culture and the court life of that period. Welcome to this creative space.
Hello friends, this is Pre and Proto History Gallery. Even though the history of mankind began millions of years ago, either they have left no written records or we are unable to decode what they have written. Our earliest artifacts are stone tools. The stone tools on display are acquired from different sites in Western India. It was indeed a revolutionary moment when one of our ancestors used stone to protect himself and his near and dear ones from predators and to procure food. During the course of time, the man developed his motor skills and created wonders. See the journey from rough boulders to finely shaped stone tools or microliths. Knowledge of controlled fire helped him a lot. Gradually, the settled man started farming and cattle rearing. Invention of the wheel, discovery of copper helped him progress immensely. Look at the human and animal figures in terracotta and stone, the exquisite pieces of jewelry, seals, finely shaped and painted pottery acquired from different sites in India and Pakistan. They show his remarkable sense of aesthetics. Tools, weapons, and other objects are also created wholeheartedly. The Harappan man was also trader and dealt with contemporary world civilizations like Mesopotamia. But the most extraordinary thing we should be proud of is his civic sense. The human being who lived 5000 years ago had planned cities and underground drainage system. I hope you will like the gallery.
The Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya Mumbai has one of the finest collection of Himalayan art in the country. This gallery of Himalayan art presents complex, mystic and fascinating tantric world of Vajrayana Buddhism. One of the attractions of this gallery is the 6 feet tall contemporary clay image of Maitreya, the future Buddha. Installed at the entrance of the gallery in a gompa, it creates ambience of the Himalayan region. Exquisite Tangha paintings, 13th century image of Maitreya from Nepal, 16th century bronze of Songtsen Gampo from Tibet are some of the highlights of this gallery. Innovative graphics, films, and interactive installations keep visitors engrossed, making their visit memorable.
Welcome to the Sculpture Gallery. The earliest sculptures of India are some exquisite sculptures procured from Harappan sites dated around 2500 to 1700 BCE. After a considerable blank period of thousands of years, sculptural art was developed under the aegis of the Mauryas. Mauryan period, that is 4th century to 2nd century BCE, can be considered as a landmark in the history of sculptural art of India. Along with highly sophisticated and massive imperial sculptures influenced by Persian art, a parallel indigenous style was also prevalent and mainly flourished under Shunga Satavahanas. Succeeding period also witnessed development of different regional schools owing to the availability of raw material and skilled hands. The sculpture gallery is intended to provide glimpse of this stylistic variety. You can see here sculptures belonging to different styles developed under royal dynasties like Kushana, Satavahan, Gupta, Maitraka, Chalukya, Chola, Pratihara, Chandela, as well as Parmara. Ancient Indian art was predominantly sacred art, based on Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain religious themes. The gallery houses icons and architectural fragments, once a part of temples and caves situated in different states of India, as well as Pakistan and Afghanistan. I hope you will appreciate the work of our ancient and medieval sculptors.
The CSMVS Museum is one of the few museums in India which has a collection of objects from East Asia. The gallery displays around 1,000 works of art from China and Japan that beguiled art lovers across the world for their ingenuity and skill. The collection began with the generous bequests of Sir Ratan Tata in 1922 and Sir Dorab Tata in 1933 and has grown with gifts from other collectors. The gallery displays a range of porcelain, ceramics, lacquerware, cloisonne, enamelware, metal, jade, crystal, wood, ivory, woodblock prints, and embroideries. The collections of snuff bottles from China and inros from Japan are of special interest.
The CSMVS has a small collection of arms and armor that consists of variety of swords, daggers, shields, helmets, matchlocks, pistols, and gunpowder flasks. These weapons were not just used for offense or defense, but are also marvelous example of artistic expression. You can see in the gallery different types of blades and hilts. There is an array of material used like jade, wood, horn, metal, to a variety of decorations from kothgari to enameling, while some of the weapons are bejeweled as well. In the adjacent gallery, one can view some typical weapon preferred by Maratha rulers like the gauntlet sword, the long straight blade sword, tiger claw weapon and katar, as shown in the photograph of a painting of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. We hope you enjoy the gallery and look at the objects more closely. Do visit the museum.
Welcome to Sir Ratan Tata Gallery and Sir Dorab Tata Gallery. These galleries showcase some of the masterpieces from European painting collection housed in CSMVs. The display of paintings in both the galleries includes history painting, portraits, landscapes, some genre scenes and animal paintings. It won't be an exaggeration to boast that the CSMVs is one of the few museums in India who has small but significant collection of European paintings. This collection was bequeathed to the museum by Sir Ratan Tata and Sir Dorab Tata in 1922 and 1933. Come, let's have a look.
The Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya, Mumbai has a small but significant collection of textiles which represents rich and diverse textile traditions of India. The gallery narrates a unique theme of passage of life, explaining importance of textiles. Textiles displayed along with interesting graphics, installations and multimedia take the visitors down the memory lane, reviving sweet memories of the past. One cannot miss visit of this interesting gallery.
The Karl Khandalwala Gallery houses the collection of Karl J. Khandalwala, former chairman of the Board of Trustees of the museum. He possessed a multifaceted personality as a lawyer, an art lover, and a photographer. He has bequeathed his entire collection to this museum. The beautiful wooden sculpture of a lady is the first art object of his collection. His collection depicts Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and even Japanese mythology in different materials like wood, stone, bronze, ceramics, and paper. The miniature paintings, Gandhar sculptures, and bronze sculptures displayed in this gallery give a glimpse of his aesthetics. Karl Khandalwala's passion towards photography has also won him many awards.
The natural history section of the museum has been formed with the intention to increase awareness about the surrounding flora and fauna. In recent times, this kind of display is helpful to make people aware of the shrinking forest and the number of animal species that are close to extinction. The collections displayed in the natural history sections were collected by the members of the Bombay Natural History Society individually or by special expeditions. These collections were given to the museum in order to enable the public to view them. This section displays interesting collections of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and invertebrates. Of special interest are the diorama cases, which show the birds and animals in their natural habitat. There are 3 galleries in the museum's natural history section. The first one is bird gallery, second mammal gallery, and the third reptile, amphibian, and fish gallery.
Museums are intercultural spaces. They promote intercultural dialogue between communities in multicultural societies and encourage increased knowledge, greater recognition, and appreciation of other cultures. This exhibition is an experiment, the first of its kind outside the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European borders, and attempts to provide a model for museums to share collections with people across the world.
The exhibition is built around a nucleus of works coming from Indian collections, public and private Indian collections, showcasing the cultural history going back not only thousands of years but millions of years of South Asia, and putting this development into global perspective, with the British Museum providing everything that pertains to the world beyond South Asia. So it's really joining forces, joining collections to come up with a new history and a new story.
The idea of this exhibition began in a conversation with Mr. Mukherjee, and we were talking about whether it would be possible to make some kind of exhibition in Mumbai that came out of the idea of a history of the world in 100 objects, to take things that would let us tell stories that were of interest to a public in India. And we decided that the best way to do this was to choose objects from particular moments of Indian history. It would be absurd to try to tell the whole story of India. Impossible. So we thought we would choose 9 moments of history. 9 moments where most Indians know where India was at that point. Moments like the Indus Valley, like Ashoka, Akbar, independence. Those moments. And from those moments, we would look at what's happening in India and then what's happening in the world.
How do you showcase 1.5 million years history of India in 15,000 square feet space? We selected 104 objects from 28 museums in India and 3 private collectors. So our job was to convince them, telling them the importance of the project, that why this particular project is so important for India and Indian museums.
Somewhere around 2 million years ago, our ancestors in Africa began making tools like these. And this tool is where our shared history as human beings begins. Our ancestors needed something to let them scrape the meat off the bones of the animals they'd killed. They needed something to strip the skins so that they could wear the fur and the leather for protection. They needed something to strip the branches from the trees, to make shelters and to burn wood. And amazingly, they invented the hand axe.
The second section of this exhibition looks at the world's first cities. And as you walk into that section, the first things you see are 2 women. The little dancing girl from Mohenjo-daro, one of the most iconic objects from the Indus Valley civilizations, and she's standing next door to another lady, but someone who actually lived in an ancient Sumerian city in southern Iraq at roughly the same time. And these 2 citizens of the world's first cities introduce a section where we start to look at how life changed when these first cities emerged about 5,000 years ago.
How do you govern an empire where the people speak different languages, have different faiths, are different peoples? It's one of the great questions of the world. And from around 700 BCE, it began to be a real question as empires began to grow in the Middle East and the Far East. For most of history, if you've been a ruler, you want to get 2 messages across to the people you rule. Firstly, that you're pretty good at ruling, and they're lucky to have you. But secondly, that you're their ruler because the gods want you to be their ruler. And that combination is a winner. But how do you communicate it? Before television, before newspapers, the internet, there's only one way that the ruler can regularly reach the subjects and tell them that the gods are on their side. And they do it through the coins.
And then the other objects in this semicircular part of the exhibition are images of gods, goddesses, and divine figures, ancestral figures sometimes, from different parts of the world. And this, I think, is almost the first time I've ever seen an exhibition which has tried to bring together these different images from all over the world at the same time.
Most of the stories in this exhibition are stories where India is part of a movement, an idea that embraces the whole world. But there's one of the stories where India is right at the beginning, and that's the story of Buddhism.
Section 6 of the exhibition is all about Indian Ocean trade and Indian Ocean traders. The objects in this section look at stories of how objects have been travelling around the Indian Ocean, creating connections between people, and with those objects, people have also been travelling as well.
One of the most significant moments in this exhibition was the opportunity to be able to present to the public two pictures. One is a picture of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. Right next to it is a sketch that is made by Rembrandt. And Rembrandt has copied a Mughal painting of Jahangir. Rembrandt is looking at Jahangir, and Jahangir is looking at a European painting. So at one level, it's a great opportunity to be able to present to the world that it's not just Mughals who are learning from European art, but also European artists are enamored with Indian art.
The rest of the section looks at the opulence and the luxury of courts from other parts of the world. At the same time as we tend to think about the courts in Ming China, Mughal India, Spanish Europe, there are equally powerful, equally opulent, equally luxurious courts happening in West Africa and many other parts of the world.
It would have been disingenuous of us if we were just going to be laudatory all through this exhibition, celebrating globalization without talking about the enormous sacrifices, the conflicts, the terror that has come along with globalization. Our message is of peace, because only with knowledge of each other can there be peace. But we also have to learn that those exchanges were not always very peaceful. So the quest for freedom presumes that there was a time when there was a lack of freedom. And so that's what the rest of the artworks in this gallery bring us to see the concerns of the world today.
How do you end an exhibition like India in the World? You know that those objects have got to be from our time, but they've got to also provide a full stop or a way of reflecting on the whole of the exhibition which the visitor has just seen. So what we did was to take objects which asked the visitor to think again about how they might conceive of history and their relationship to the past.